right. Thanks for joining for today's episode. This is going to be one of the first our many English version episodes discussions about political situation in Ukraine and potentially geopolitical situation in the world. My name is James Talberg. I'm potentially going to be the host on that channel, and I'm presenting our first and for now the only partner, Ruslan Bortnik. He's going to answer some of my questions and discuss the political situation in Ukraine and potentially the information that will be connected in the world. Thanks for finding time today and thanks for joining us.
Hello, James. It's a pleasure for me. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay. I want to jump into the heated topic now that we have a new counteroffensives from the Russian border on the northern part of Ukraine. Just to open up that subject, I think we had, if we can call it that way, at least a year or a year and a half of a very stable situation on the front line. It was only focused on the eastern part of Ukraine, around the Donbas and southern part of Ukraine. But I think that conflict was very localized and, if I can call it that way, controllable. It looks to me as that's a new step of an escalation where Russians could have collect enough force and power to make a new counteroffensive. That being said, what is the situation right now? How prepped or not prepped was Ukraine for that new counteroffensive on the northern part? That just to remind our viewers, that was the occupied at the early stages of the war. And I think it's interesting to discuss how they prepped, because they could have potentially known that that counteroffensive will start and they might potentially get hit again on that part of the country. How did they prep, or they haven't? And what is the situation at the moment, and how risky it is in terms of the work perspective and potentially on the political arena as well?
Thank you for question. It's not easy question for me, and because it's a question of all general headquarters in this war. You stand it up, but let's look on the map to talk about this more in more concrete way. I'll try to show you the map in this situation. And second, do you see the map?
It's loading. It's loading right now. Yep, I can see the map.
Okay, it's great. It's a map of Ukraine. It's like a star on the map of Europe. It's the biggest country in Europe, bigger even than Germany or France. And like a star, we see it's the borders of Ukraine. It's a Moldova, Romania, and Poland here, and Belarus and Russia from the east and north of Ukraine. And the green painted area, it's area of Ukraine which were elaborated during Ukrainian counteroffensive operations during 2022-2023. And red painted area, this is Crimea, for example, it's a Russian-controlled Ukrainian territories. Nowadays, Russia controls more than 100,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. It's bigger than Bulgaria, Portugal, and many other countries in Europe.
I think that's a great reference to let people know that that area that looks not as a big part of the country, because Ukraine is, just like you mentioned, the biggest countries Europe is partially being controlled and occupied now by the Russian army. I think that's a great reference, that if we take that square meter or kilometer, that would be as the size of Bulgaria. So we can say that that's a big chunk that is being occupied and controlled at the moment.
So it's huge territory which is habited near 8 to 10 million people now.
Mm-hmm.
And you see these arrows, it's directions of Russian offensive operation for now. You see a lot of arrows in this area, more than 20 directions, local directions of new Russian offensive operations. And here is in the north, the new Russian attempt to achieve more lands in Kharkiv Oblast. It's a new Russian offensive operation in Kharkiv Oblast. Now Russia is trying to move to the Kharkiv direction to be closer to the Kharkiv city, which before the war were inhabited more than 1 million people. Russia wants to take this city on the distance of artillery shells to do this city uninhabited, to do this city unfunctional in this situation. And Russia, of course, in the second direction, trying to cut this part of Ukrainian territory and go to the back of Donbas front through the Kharkiv Oblast. In general, it looks like Russia, through this a very big number of local attacks, Russia is trying to strengthen Ukrainian defense lines. Russia trying to disappear and spread unlimited Ukrainian military resources in the different directions, and Russia is trying to find the weak place in Ukrainian defense line to make a main strike, to make a main offensive operation. Because Ukrainian experts are saying that Russia has, in this region of Russia, has a reserves, additional reserves, near 100,000 soldiers, and Russia prepared these reserves to the main strike during this year, to the main offensive operation, which is not started yet. Russia is trying to find the weak place. Many soldiers and officers of Ukrainian army saying that Russia is going to make this offensive operation to the Sumy region, maybe trying to surround the Kharkiv from the north. Maybe Russia will try to achieve a new offensive operation even in the north, in Chernigovska Oblast, trying to cut this left bank of the Dnieper River, which dividing the Ukrainian lands on two main big parts.
In general, is that their strategic goal?
It's their strategic goal for the next few years, I think. 2 or 3 years. Russia is willing to occupy the left bank of Ukrainian lands and south of Ukraine, taking account, of course, Odessa and Nikolaev. It's a port on the Black Sea.
Just to touch base again, that new offensive operation that Russians have initiated on the north side. In your personal interviews, you have discussed that multiple times, that can be an option and that can be a possibility in the near future, that they can attack again on the northern part. I mean, the Ukrainian intelligence and the Ukrainian army, they definitely have more insights and information than you do personally. How come you had an idea, or you were mentioning the possibility that they can attack on the northern side, but it looks like it is quite successful at the moment, just from the perspective that they're spreading the Ukrainian army and can potentially strike harder, or just in general on the map that we can see that they're trying to occupy, again, big parts of the territory. So I'm just curious how the Ukrainian army have prepped or haven't, and how much information we have at the moment that we can expose to discuss that topic.
To be honest, in this situation, the end of this war, the military end, the victory in this war is not possible without the occupation or capitulation of the capital of the country. And of course, I think Russia is preparing. Russia has the plan to the new offensive operation on the Kiev direction. But it looks like for now, for nowadays, the Russia has not enough resources for the new offensive operation from the north to the north of Ukrainian lands, or during this all Ukrainian, Belarusian, and Ukrainian-Russian borders. But Russia is preparing for this operation in future. Russia is preparing for the new offensive operation to Kiev. And as I understand Russians' plans, they will be ready for this operation maybe in 2 years, in 2026. Because they have plans to develop their army to in number, in equipment, and many other things. They are developing very fast Belarusian army also. They have regular military exercise on the Belarusian territories and lands. Moreover, over Russia situated the nuclear weapon in Belarus last year also. So Russia is preparing these Belarusian lands to the new offensive operation to Kiev, to the capital of Ukraine, but not in this year. I hope so, because it looks like that Russia doesn't have enough resources for it now.
How Ukraine is prepping for all those potential offenses?
Ukraine is building fortification lines during all these borders, and this is the reason why a big amount of Ukrainian troops are situated near these borders, and Ukraine is not able to use them in the eastern or southern front. So this situation leads us to keeping a lot of forces here and to building and defending lines here and spreading a lot of money and resources for the defense of our northern lands.
Just to open that topic a little bit more in terms of the possibilities or the lack of possibilities that the Russian army and Russian leaders have and their plans in terms of what they're planning to occupy, what they're planning to achieve in terms of tactical and strategic goals. We had about 6 or up to 6 months that Ukraine haven't received any aid from United States or European countries. Could that potentially affect the new offenses that we have from the Russian side and all their potential successes on the battlefield? And that being said, Ukraine have received and started receiving most of the approved aid from the United States and other partners. Is that already on the ground and helping the Ukrainian army and soldiers to prevent potential new offenses?
Of course, we are very grateful our Western allies for such a big support, and especially for United States in this situation, because taking into account the beginning of the war, and from that time to now, we obtained more than 250 billion United States dollars support, military support for more than 100 billion, and another economical, humanitarian, and other support for Ukraine. Of course, without all this support, we would not be able to continue this war, to defend the Ukrainian lands. But the last United States military package and aid, to be honest, is something late. Is sometimes late, because we lost near half a year without a high level of support from United States, and this time we lost a lot of soldiers without enough of shells, without enough of artillery, without enough of ammunition. So the last half a year before United States newest package, we lost a lot of soldiers, and nowadays even obtaining a new package of United States military support, sometimes we are not able to use it because we are feeling a huge lack of soldiers. We had a big problems with the mobilization in Ukraine, and so there is a good Russian proverb that calls that the spoon is very important to the breakfast. But now it looks like we obtained the spoon not for the breakfast, but for the dinner. in the best way, the best calculation, maybe even for the lunch. So we are very good.
It's too little and too late.
Yeah. And so it's a main goal and main dangers for Ukraine for now. Situation when the new United States military aid will be obtained, the new wave of mobilization will be done, and if it will not make a good influence on the battlefield, mobilization and aid will not, if they will not lead us to the victory, they will stand very sharp question about the future of the war, about the future of Ukraine. And maybe now, maybe this year is maybe one of the last chances for Ukraine to change the situation in the battlefield, or in other way, we should start. Should start the negotiation with Russia about the peace, and that peace will not be so suitable and will not be so pleasant for Ukraine.
That being said, in terms of the situation on the battlefield and what Ukraine is capable of doing by itself, and obviously with all the aid from the partners that the Ukrainians are grateful for, there has been a lot of discussions on the European side that there are countries like France and Poland that have announced that they are considering to potentially sending their troops to Ukraine. I think Estonian government have made an announcement on their end as well in that regard. Do you think this is a possibility, an actual possibility, that NATO troops or troops of certain countries from Europe or NATO will be sending their military groups to Ukraine, or this is just political games inside Europe and somebody is trying to get a little bit of PR on the Ukrainian conflict, and there are no practical grounds that we can see those actions actually being taken?
I think this possibility is very low for now, because this catastrophic stability in Ukraine, this balance, even if you take into account the big amount of occupied Ukrainian territories, this situation is not very dangerous for our Western allies and for our Western neighbors. To be honest, it's far away from them still. It's even far away from Kyiv now, 500 kilometers to do the battlefield lines. And from European perspectives, it looks like this balance around of Ukraine is not dangerous for them, and it doesn't demand from them the new steps on the escalation way. But in the future, situations can be changed. For example, if Russia will achieve a strategic success in Ukraine, and if Russia will occupy the left bank of the Dnieper, of south of Ukraine, and the Ukrainian state will be under the dangers, real under the dangers, I think the few European countries are able to send their troops to Ukraine. France, Poland, Baltic countries, Netherlands, maybe other countries, they will send their troops to save Ukrainian state in this situation, or to keep defense the Odessa, the ports on the South Sea, which are extremely important for the future of these lands. Without sea, Ukraine, like a country, will be in very weak position, and from the historic perspective in general. But another scenario is also important, possible if Ukraine will achieve the success in the battlefield, and Russian troops will be thrown out from Ukraine, or Russia will stand on the edge of destabilization. Western troops also would come to Ukraine to help Ukraine to make a deal with new geopolitical circumstances, with deal with future of the Russia in this situation. So in the bad and in the good scenario, the Western militaries can come to Ukraine. In nowadays stability situation, even catastrophic stability situation for Ukrainian people, of course, they will not come to Ukraine because there is no big necessity for sending this troop to Ukraine. But to be honest, we need to remember and to remind our audience that a lot of Western soldiers are now already in Ukraine. We are talking about different type of technical teams. We are talking about of special investigation services of different countries. We are talking about the guards in embassies, which are very, very wide, very big now in Ukraine. And of course, we are talking about the International Volunteer Corps. More than 10,000 international fighters came to Ukraine to fight for Ukraine, to fight against Russian troops. And so the military presence of our Western allies is very high in Ukraine now, but it's not official brigades and official troops in Ukraine with ammunition, with their full commanders and so on. It's not an official military presence, but it's a military presence in any way.
If we move into the political side of that conflict, there is going to be a summit in Switzerland about potential peace discussions, and Russians are not invited. Some countries haven't announced yet if they're going to be present or not. But that being said, what is Ukrainian goal in that summit? What Ukrainians are aiming to achieve out of that summit, and what would be a win for Ukraine by the end of those meetings and conversations between the leaders?
Global Peace Summit is not a summit for negotiations about the peace. Of course, it's funny, I think, for the first side, but it's a preparation summit to the future negotiation with Russia. The main Ukrainian goal in this summit and the goal of our allies, it's a creation of international coalition around Ukrainian peace formula, which was proposed by Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky 1 or 2 years ago. I want to remind you the main topics of this formula. It's a liberation of all Ukrainian lands. It's the borders of Ukraine for 1991. It's a punishment for Russian military crimes. It's a financial contribution for Russia. It's food and nuclear security and many others topics in this formula. But Ukraine will try to use this summit to make a coalition around this Ukrainian approach to the peace resolution. And then later, this international coalition will take this Ukrainian formula and to put it on the table in front of Russia. It's a Ukrainian plan. We are trying to make a team for the future negotiation with Russia. So, of course, this peace summit will not lead us to peace just now, but it's also an important step to the future peace negotiation with Russia. And of course, nowadays, Ukrainian demands, Ukrainian stocks are very high, but it's only a start position. And there is a trade hope, that in the future, the peace will be somewhere in the middle between Ukrainian and Russian position. Also, Ukraine is willing to see in the summit the heads of the states, and especially the President of the United States, Joe Biden, because, of course, Joe Biden could become a leader of this summit, an informal leader of this summit, and could become a main person on which we other leaders of the states will be oriented.
We discussed that official position of the Ukrainian government and of the Ukrainian leaders, but I'm also curious in terms of the Ukrainian people themselves. You're currently living in Kiev in Ukraine, and you can hear what people are talking about on the streets. You can sense what they're concerned about, how they're feeling about the situation. If at the early stages of the war, when Russia just attacked and invaded Ukraine, I've been into Ukraine myself physically at that time. The people were very motivated to resist, and they were very inspired with a lot of hopes that they will win that war and win that war fast. Now, after more than 2 years of the conflict and the fact that the Ukrainian position from the government haven't changed and they want to deoccupy the country, how do the people themselves feel about it? How many more sacrifices and how patient they are and how much more they can take on that full scale of war on their individual level? Are they supporting yet 100% the Ukrainian government with its position, or there is different trends that are being uncovered now with the mobilization law, with the length of the conflict, and they're each one's an individual position?
Of course, I'm not able to talk behind all the people of Ukraine, but from my professional side, I can say that Ukraine now is very divided society. Divided on the passionate part of society. It's the soldiers and the members of their families. It's a political activist and people who are feeling now in this situation even better than it was before the war. To be honest, in every war there is people who make good money, who take the good position, who take a lot of power in the situation. So this passionate part, which insist on the continuation of the war till the victory, till the good end for Ukraine. And this party near 30 till 40% of Ukrainian population. And another part, and this part, passionate part, is very, very loud. You can hear, you can see these people in all mass media, in all public platform. They are very brave, very loud, very bright, very active. They are core of Ukrainian governance in different levels. And there is a bigger but silent part, Ukrainians who are against mobilization, Ukrainians who lost confidence about their future at all. They don't see the good future, the good exit from this exit strategy, from this situation. And this bigger part of Ukrainian society is covered because they are very silent. It's covered by this passionate part. In general, I'm feeling a lot of attraction, a lot of depression in Ukrainian society now. Much bigger if we compare in the beginning
To the beginning of the war.
With the beginning of the war. And I feel that people, even the passionate people, they don't see the future, their own personal future. They are still very patriotic, they are still very brave, but it's, to be honest, it's a mortal courage. It's a courage people who are putting their life for something, but they don't see the good future. So we society which lost confidence in the future and divided society, and economical, political, defense situation is of course not very good. It's not so scary like in mass media, but it's not very good in any case. And the demand from the society to the government to the start the new peace negotiation is growing up all the time during different sociology researches, and the demand to stop the war, even without negotiation, also is growing up in this situation. I think this demand for peace negotiation and stopping the war will be the main society demand in the next year already. I think it will cover more than 3 or 4 parts of Ukrainian society till the spring next year.
We have discussed the situation from the Ukrainian perspective and its allies. I think it's very interesting to touch the perspective of the country that Ukraine is at the moment fighting with. How is the situation in the Russian society, and how are they approaching that conflict? When they started, I think there is a big amount of citizens on the Russian end and people that were surprised. And I think at the moment we have enough research and enough sociological information that they have formed groups that are supporting that war. They also have groups that are supporting peace and negotiations in Ukraine, and some of them are willing to return or in support of returning the occupied land back to Ukraine and the Ukrainians. And some of them are exactly the opposite, the extremist core in the Russian population that claiming that they want to occupy the whole country and they will keep fighting until they achieve their strategic goals.
Russian government is preparing for the long war, and we see it in the different level of resigning the Russian government after presidential election, and we see it in different attempts to developing the military-industrial complex and to attempts to decrease the level of corruption in Russian army. But if we are talking about the Russian society is still in childhood mood. I can call this in such a way, because if you will take into account the last sociology census made by Levada company, 71% of a Russian population can support in the future decision of Putin, of President of Russia Putin, if he will make a decision to stop this war. 71.
But they will support specifically that decision, or they will just support whatever decision he comes up with?
Only decision of the Putin. Only decision of the
So it's a passive group of people that is the majority in the country, that they will just support whatever direction he's going to take the country to.
But at the same time, only 30% of Russians are ready to the compromises with Ukraine and are ready to give Ukrainian back occupied territories. Only 1 from the 3 Russians are ready to this, 30%. And 60% of Russians doesn't support compromise with Ukraine. And doesn't support the giving back to Ukraine or occupied territories. So from one side, Russians are ready for negotiation and they want to peace. But from other side, they are not ready for compromise. So peace is impossible, and all the doings of their decisions are belong to the power, to the Putin. Only Putin or the Kremlin is able to make such a decision. In Ukraine, we have a common situation, because in Ukraine, because in Ukraine we also have a majority for the stopping the war, but at the same time majority to don't make any compromises with Russia. How to stop the war without the compromises? For nowadays, nobody knows.
Putin was elected for his new term. What would that mean for Russia? if they have elected him for a new term, obviously they have agreed with his politics and his decision. But I think that would mean a new chapter for Russia as a country, and that would be a new chapter for the relationships between the Russians and the Europeans. And what would that mean also for the conflict in Ukraine? And we have seen that he started doing changes in his government. He's replacing some of the people that have been working with him for years. What is his main strategy at the moment, and how will that influence the conflict in Ukraine, and how would that influence the relationship between the Russian Federation and the European countries, and as well with the United States of America?
Russia is preparing for a long war, very, very long war. And these replacements, even in Russian government, they're in very small amount only, because only 25% of Russian government was replaced after the re-election of Putin. Long Putin, long war, the main economical resources to the military industrial complex, and to prepare and to develop in the new Russian army, which, for example, for the beginning of the war, for Russian army was smaller than North Korean army. Russia was not ready to such a big war. And now Russia is building a big army, like a Soviet Union army. 1,500,000, maybe even more soldiers and officers will be in that army till 2026. It's a huge army for Europe. It's a huge army, of course. And small replacement in that government, in the new government, was only a signs of an internal political fight inside of between the different towers of the Kremlin, and also it's an attempt from of the Putin to make the Russian political and governmental system more effective. So the Ministry of Defense, for example, was replaced because of corruption. So the head of the Security Council was replaced because of age. But no one from the Russian previous government was replaced with the claims and with the investigations from the.
So those are just technical replacements.
And so on. There was no any punishment. There was only finding a better way to the governance in Russia. And this Russia, of course, is very dangerous. It's very dangerous because this Russia has the goal, the geopolitical competition with the United States and the West. This Russia is very combined and united. This Russia is still very corrupted, of course, but force Putin, the Putin force, because it's his fourth term in presidential term, will be closer to Stalin than to Gorbachev, for example. And these changes, it's a result of this war also. It's a result of 15 years competition with the West also. Because at the beginning of his governance, Putin was very liberal president. Nobody remember now that Putin was made attempts to become a member of NATO for Russia. Putin was the person who proposed by the family of Yeltsin at the end. But the time and the Russia and time changed Putin a lot.
How did that transition happen from Putin that wanted to join NATO and was a very liberal president to what we're experiencing now?
I think it's because Russia hasn't found her place in a geopolitical construction, in geopolitical building, which was built by the United States and the West. Russia, a huge country with huge ambitions, and there was not there was not finding place for such a country in the Western system. And I think it's a mistake from the West. It's a geopolitical mistake because in other way, if the West could find such place for Russia, for nowadays, Russia could be a very useful and important part of the Western world in the global competition with China, for example. But the West, especially Europe and of course United States, hasn't found that place for Russia, and Russia, of course, became an enemy, like relations between the man and woman. And if somebody declines somebody's, and it leads to the conflict in the end, very often.
Okay, just to finalize that on something more positive, what are the positive trends that you're personally seeing and experiencing now in Ukraine, despite all the conflict and all the trauma and the crisis that the country is in right now? Are there any positive trends that the country is experiencing? Potentially, they are developing their economy back to pre-war numbers, or anything that you think is positive in the society on the economical aspect?
Ukraine is still stable country and even semi safe country. I think everybody could see the great guitar playing of Mr. Blinken in Ukrainian bar some weeks ago. So we are still safe, almost safe, or semi-safe place. We are a stable country with a lot of problems, economical, military, political, democracy, and I think in general, in the era of nuclear state, maybe and or possibly even we will not achieve such a huge changes which our grandparents and their grandparents saw after the First and Second World War. So in the era of nuclear powers, absolute victory is impossible, I think. So absolute and the huge dramatic changes will not is also not so possible like it was before in the previous ages. And in this era, wars in this era, it's wars to find the new balance, to find the new way, the new lines of division, but it's not the wars for the general attrition of general existation of the countries and the peoples. I hope so. So I hope so that we will find a balance in the future after the presidential elections in the United States, after this elections year around the world, and this balance will be still suitable for Ukraine.
What do Ukrainians as a society and Ukraine as a government have to do to develop a new strategy, or what kind of strategy, in your opinion, that could be to succeed and thrive in that unbalanced and new uncertain world?
I think the main currency in this world is the solidarity, internal solidarity for every society. Divided societies, and it doesn't depend where they are situated. United States, Canada, France or Germany or Ukraine or Rwanda, it doesn't matter. But divided society will not win in this geopolitical competition, in this geopolitical era. Internal solidarity is extremely important for every government around the world, and especially for Ukraine. Ukrainian government does in this direction very small, I think. And we have still a lot of division lines inside of Ukraine. Language, church, history, attitude to the history, and so on. We need to come over these lines, come out over these divides, like any other society around the world. And of course, Ukraine should find the internal resources for continuation for this war. I'm talking about the economical resources to decrease the level of corruption, to increase the governance in different levels. And the end, but it's a most important thing, I think, for nowadays for Ukraine. Ukrainian government, Ukrainian president should be very courageous. And I'm talking not only about the continuation of war. I'm talking about the fighting the peace. Ukrainian president, Ukrainian government, they have to take all responsibility for themselves, for the future peace negotiation and for future peaceful compromise. Behind me, there is a lot of books and a lot of historical books, but there are two books of two generals. One general, name of general, it's Skoropadsky, it's Ukrainian general who was the head of the Ukrainian state in 1918, and another book of the General Mannerheim, who was the head of Finland state. They was very familiar together. They was from one age, from one circumstances, but one of them, Mannerheim, made an independent and sovereign Finland state, even losing the territories after losing the war against Soviet Union in 1940. Other general, I'm talking about Skoropadsky, was very good, extremely good, but he hasn't find a compromises with the Soviet Union, Soviet Russia at that moment. He hasn't find the compromises with the geopolitical surroundings around our country, and he lost everything. He died abroad. So I think it's a lesson for the future. It's one of the lessons for Ukrainian history for the future Ukrainian politicians, and we have to be very brave. No, not only to continue the war, but also for starting the negotiations.
Right. Thank you for your time today. And we all wish and hope that Ukraine as a society will find how to compromise on topics that are important for them and will act as one against challenges that they have.
I hope so.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, James.